AI Create presents Hairy Topics.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Hairy Topics podcast. Today we've got a really special guest, László Gaál. He's like basically a one-man production unit, and we're going to explore his journey into creativity and some of the amazing spec ads and films that he's been working on, and talk about what his process has become, how he's come into this space, and really learn about how AI is unlocking creativity. I'm really excited for this conversation. First of all, László, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, how you wound up in the space of AI, what your background is?
Sure. My name is László Gaál, and I'm originally from Budapest, Hungary. And there I worked as a freelance colorist for the past 20 years. So I worked in the traditional film industry, in the post-production section, and only as a colorist. So that means I was responsible for creating the style, the look of commercials, music videos, short films, TV series. And when Midjourney became public in 2022, then I was in Singapore, and I didn't have any knowledge about generative AI before. So I started to use it, I started to experiment with it, and I was like blown away about the possibilities, blown away about the extra little creativeness that the AI has. And at that time, I was thinking about, like, as much as I enjoy being in post-production, the industry will change a lot in the following years if this will turn into generative AI videos too. So these weeks are what I call the generative AI honeymoon. But what can you do with this new software? What can you try out? What are the new things that you can create with it? And I wasn't sleeping in Singapore. You have this like crazy public transport system, which is extremely good. So on the bus, I was generating some new images. On the subway system, I was doing it. And back when I got to the hotel, then I experimented some more. After a few weeks, I realized that there are some things missing, there are some shortcomings, and how will generative AI will come over that? That's when I started to raise some questions like, for jobs, for commercials, when will we have some kind of control? Do we need control? How can we explain to clients that, okay, this is not a traditional tool, this is not a traditional software where you have 100% control. So since then, I had these kind of like roller coaster ups and downs with AI.
And have you got control?
Like, there's more control now. There are some new tools that will give you more control on your generations. But the question is, do we need that? Like, for some projects, of course, you will have to have that kind of extra control. When we are talking about the logo, when we are talking about text, you are looking to control generative AI in a way that will satisfy the clients. But my interesting question is that, like, okay, what if you let loose AI? Like, what if you let AI decide some things? What if you try to mine, try to get that extra crazy generations out from AI that will maybe inspire you? So I don't like to personify, or I wouldn't want to personify AI at all. But still, I would rather think of it as like a crazy creative director who's from another planet, who is from another society, and he has his own like creative ideas. You can count on him, but of course, like sometimes he's late. You just cannot control him 100%. If you want to have like 100% control, you might lose some of the creativeness of this person. So that's why I think for some projects, of course, you will have to have 100% control. But I still think that for some other projects, you need to mine the extra creativity that generative AI holds. Also, I think sometimes it's a very good thing to know that there might be a little extra creative mind behind the human who is using AI.
Just out of curiosity, because I look at filmmaking, I see two levels, right, when we talk about control. And you come from a filmmaking background, a post-production background, as a colorist. And as a colorist, it is all about control, right? It is about very specific control. And when you think about the difference between filmmaking and in that kind of highly directed and curated view, do you think that there's room for no control? Or do you think that you've got two different industries that are developing, where you've got one side where they're going to want really strict control and want highly directable, and one side where the experimentation is actually the magic.
I think we will see a whole range of softwares and possibilities. So by now, it's like 2022. It's around 3 years after generative AI became public and well known. Everybody started to play around, experiment with it. But we still reference most of the AI tools as AI. So we don't specify. And it would be such a misunderstanding as never talking about like cinema cameras or the cameras that we put into doorbells, right? So these are extremely different things, but we still can reference them to as cameras. But with AI, I would like to have some kind of differentiation between AI that can create something extremely beautiful and creative, and the AI that you create, for example, like a large language model or some kind of the newer image generation models who are maybe less creative, but very good with text, for example. So we're using the same word, camera, for the doorbell camera and the cinema camera, and we will have to see some kind of change with AI too. Also, I think both ends of the spectrum will be very, very interesting. So if you are going to the totally random outputs and you are going to the totally controlled outputs, both of them will be extremely interesting. But still, I don't think that I would call AI a tool in a traditional sense. So for me, a tool, first of all, has a manual. So if you don't know how to deal with that tool, then you just look up in the manual and you will see every function and you will see the outputs. With AI, this is not the case. The CEO of Anthropic has mentioned that they understand around 3% of their own model. That's why you cannot really have a manual for these tools, but I think that's why it's kind of interesting to explore what the tool knows, what the model knows. For example, a hammer is a tool, it has a manual. AI doesn't have a tool, it doesn't have a manual. So I would rather reference to it as a black box where you have some kind of input and the output can be a little bit random, but that kind of randomness, I think, very, very good for the end product. In the future, I think there will be a lot of space for generative AI that has a lot of control, especially because it's not sometimes the choice of the artist or the client or the agency, but it's just simply laws. But also the other end, sometimes you will have to let loose AI and just like, okay, what can you do? Sometimes my generations are more interesting when I mistype something, when in the prompt you start to type a little bit too fast and then you create some kind of mistake. The generative AI model misunderstands what you want to do, and then suddenly you realize that, okay, this is much more interesting compared to my original intention.
So you've made a few spec ads, you've done some great client work. I particularly love the spec ad that you made for Porsche. I don't know what Porsche said, if anything, but I'd love to hear. But I'd just love to hear in kind of that exploratory work that you do, what's gone well? What have been the pleasant, magical surprises? And what's gone badly, where actually there was a bit of a learning curve? Can you share a little bit?
Sure, we can talk about the learning curve, but sometimes this kind of curve never ends, right? So especially with AI, there are things that I'm still interested if it's possible to solve. Just like months ago, I started to experiment with something and I'm still trying to solve it. There are things that nobody knows if it's solvable or not. And there you are and trying to explore it. There's this saying that like, oh, I was born too late to explore the world. I was born too early to explore the universe. But I think we are just born the right time to explore this kind of black box material, these models that are extremely interesting for creative minds. And with traditional filmmaking, for example, as a colorist, if you call me, you say, oh, I have a 60-second TVC with this many shots, this kind of scenes, I can create you some kind of like detailed plan. I can give you a budget range, how many hours will it take. Even if you just call me with a simple idea with AI, I always tell that like, okay, you need to test it first. Because sometimes the most simple things that in real life extremely simple and sound simple are the things that with AI extremely hard. If the model doesn't know it, or maybe just the words that you're using are not connected to that kind of movement, camera movement, actor movement in the dataset, then this will not connect and your generation will fail. So that's for me also very interesting, that even if you have a great experience, you can just change one thing, change some little detail in the prompt, and maybe it will just like fall apart. So it's kind of random still. So one of the funny things, maybe I'm rushing a little bit forward, in the Porsche spec ad, there was a joke. The whole pun is that this family might have this kind of like great neck turning abilities. We don't know if it's true or not. There's this myth around the family. Like I needed the heads to be turned. It's quite simple in my mind. So I left that at the very, very end of my job. Generative AI, especially Google DeepMind VO, was able to solve the most crazy things that I never imagined that it would be solvable. And when I went to the most simple thing at the end, the joke part when they are turning their heads, that's when I was struggling with it a lot of times. So I think I used 22 or 23 different expressions just for the head turning part to make it turn the way I want. Or another example is another spec ad that I did last summer that was made with Runway Gen 3. And I really, really love to work with text to video. So I think that gives you some kind of extra natural outputs. It's very hard to explain like how different it is compared to image to video, but still, I think text to video is really, really great. And with that one, the interesting thing was that it was featuring this concrete city without any plants, without any life. And as the car goes through, then these plants start to grow out. And the end result looked like a very, very VFX heavy output. So, to create that with like 3D animation, it would have taken maybe months and the budget will be like crazy high. After that, one of my friends asked me if I can help him. He was doing a treatment and he just needs one shot with a car because he cannot find anything similar. It's just like a car standing in front of a building, moving to the left, camera panning to the left. So I was like, okay, it should be easy after all the things that I done. And I spent maybe 3 or 4 hours just for generating that one video, and it just didn't work. So there's this whole randomness, and for spec ads, it's very, very interesting to experiment with it. But of course, with client work, you have to deal with how can you communicate it to the client, and also when do you give up trying. So how many hours, how much time can you spend on fine-tuning just like one shot, one movement, one action, before you say that, okay, this might not be in the model at all. With that spec ad, I also had at least some kind of ideas prepared. So I knew that like Gen 3 is coming out, and from the examples from the company, Runway, I saw that, okay, this is like really looking cinematic. So I just noted down some like basic ideas, maybe some things that I wanted to do in the past like 8 or 10 years. And just noted down some things just for myself to test when this model comes out, will it be able to create these or not? So these were just like basic notes about, okay, I will have this like crazy little idea. Can it work? Can it be done? How much time will it take? But the interesting part with the Porsche spec ad is that I didn't really know that I will get access to VO2. So I didn't have any preparations and didn't have any ideas. So suddenly I got access and I was like, okay, let's experiment with it. The whole story started from, I was trying to create European towns in different ages. One man was standing on the pavement, sees a beautiful car, the car moves around and he's just like looking after the car. Let's check if the model knows how European towns should look like in different decades. So 60s, 80s, 70s. I'm a kind of like a car guy, so I love cars. So I was thinking if it's different decades, then it should be like different generations of the car. And then I was thinking, okay, if it's different generations of the car, it could be different generations of that person or that family. And that's how this whole idea came to me that like, okay, maybe it should be a family, and this head turning will be something that's like special to them. I was creating the character of the son, the parent, the grandparent, and from there the whole story just like completely snowballed. So many people ask me like how long did it take, but it was more like a process. I really think that traditional filmmaking is very linear. You have the pre-production phase, you have the production phase, and you have the post-production phase. And if you miss something, it's very hard to go back. With AI, I think that the middle part is very much like a circle. So you are just like stuck there. If you can have some kind of great idea, then you can generate that new shot 5 minutes after you're rendering something out. So with traditional filmmaking, if you have some kind of good idea when you're in the editing phase or in the post-production phase, then it's already too late. You cannot just explain to the producer that, hey, I would like to travel back to the shooting location because I have a great idea. But with AI, you can. So the creative workflow is very different because really the access was given to me for my surprise. And I was very excited about it. And I think at the very end, it turned out well because this kind of process gave me a lot of freedom. So instead of like, okay, you have to prepare for it and then that's it, we have a deadline, I was able to have last minute ideas, more generations for the same ideas, which helped me a lot to build a story at the end.
Out of curiosity, what was the reaction? I know what I saw, and I know that I loved the story. For me, it's very Wes Anderson-esque, the way you've told that story. And it kind of proved the fact that you could really tell a good story, put a consistent style and directorial kind of treatment to something. And it was really a nice, well done, and well proven case as far as that goes. I'm curious what the reaction was from the general market. Was there a reaction from Porsche that you got? Was there like, what have been the reactions to the work, to your career, to etc.?
Yeah, it was really multi-layered because so many people reached out, but let's talk about the good. So first of all, of course, Porsche with their official account commented under the video saying, I think mind-blowing, which was for me was like, okay, this was worth doing. And I was really happy when I saw that.
That's the best. You get it from the manufacturer saying, well done.
Generally, what was interesting for me about the reactions is that many traditional filmmakers reached out to me, which didn't really happen last year. So maybe there's a little bit of change this year that we are at this tipping point where even from people who are sacrificing their life for cinema, for commercials in their daily life, can see that some of the shots are becoming very real, acceptable, amazing, interesting. You have to know that I'm more about testing these tools. I really love testing. So this whole spec commercial started as kind of a test too. It kind of showcases to me that something is really natural and something is very cinematic with Google VO, and you can use it in many ways. And the funny thing was that I was focusing on the ad part. Of course, for me, that was the most interesting thing. But I showed it to an agency, and of course, they very liked it, but I felt that they already seen a lot of spec commercials done with AI. I just really wanted to do one tiny little montage at the very end. So maybe just like, like a VO output is 8 seconds, and you can kind of prompt for edits too. I didn't really use it, and usually I found it a little bit hard to control. But for this one, I just like wanted to create some kind of like crazy montage of the behind the scenes. So in this 8 second output, VO was able to do I think, 19 different cuts. It was this flashy behind-the-scenes montage, and I thought like, oh, this looks funny and it looks kind of realistic. So I sent it to the same agency. They were seeing the ad before, but their response was like, okay, like, where are you shooting now? Have you on travel? And I'm like, no, this is the same AI model. And they were like, oh, this looks crazy real. So that's when it clicked to me that, okay, maybe first of all, we seen a lot of spec commercials done with AI, but we haven't seen many, for example, like documentaries done with AI, or realistic things, real life looking things done with AI. We've seen a lot of commercials, fantasy scenes, sci-fi, anything. But the real life moments can be extremely interesting for people. Also, the other interesting thing about the behind the scenes part is that technically it gave another layer, another kind of technical challenge to the project. For this project, I only used text to video. That was only available through VFX with Veo. And that means you have to describe anything and everything with text only. And when it came to the behind the scenes part, then you have to describe something that's happening before the camera, like the actual scenes that they are shooting. But you have to also describe the cameras, the camera gear, the equipment, and the crew. So it was quite challenging. How can you fit all these kind of descriptions in a text box that also Veo will accept? So that was quite challenging, but at the end, I think the reactions were more crazy about the behind the scenes part. So the reactions were mostly good. And also, I like to create things that make people talk and think about the future, because I think that was happening with the previous spec commercial last year, that it raised some questions, it induced some talks between people, and yeah, I really, really like to engage in conversations like that.
You say mostly. There were some negative reactions too?
Of course, like one of my favorite reactions that was on a mailing list. I will not name the mailing list or the person, but he was criticizing my editing, which was like totally understandable. But the editing, like, for him was like too fast. He cannot understand anything. His idea was that I edited it like that to hide the faults, the mistakes of AI. But this was not the case. Yeah, I really like this fast editing style. First of all, like, I think he was kind of missing the point. So I'm not trying to be an editor in the future. This is not my editor show reel. This was just like an experiment to see what is possible with AI. If I have to edit for myself, then this is the way I edit. So this kind of fast edits, fast cuts are the things that for me are really interesting with commercials, when it's very fast, but it tells you a coherent story. And then when the commercial ends, then the first thing you're thinking about is that, like, okay, I just want to watch it again and then again and again, because I want to understand more. I want to notice the small little jokes. And then you are watching it like 4 or 5 times because you enjoy it so much. Other thing that he mentioned was that, for example, the voiceover was sounding very, very AI, and it for him sounded very, very bad. And the voiceover in the commercial part is real. It was done by an American Fiverr artist, and it was not even AI, but because it was under an AI video, he was criticizing it. We are at a point where people are criticizing sounding like AI, and that for me was creating some questions in my head. We are criticizing a human voice because it sounds more like AI. Then we are at a point where it will be really, really hard, even for professionals, what is coming from a human and what is not.
Do you worry that actually this is getting so good now that we can create any scenario and fool people? You look at that, and I go down a path where I worry about identity when I start thinking about that, and just people being able to create anything referencing someone else's identity, and how do we know what really happened and what really didn't? And I worry about the replication of identity. But how do you think about that? Do you have any worries about where this goes?
Yes, but like most of my worry is not about image and video generation, actually. Most of my worry is about large language models. So yeah, this might be a really big discussion.
We're talking about creativity and where it goes, and these are the tools of it. So I'd love to hear, as a really creative person, what goes through your mind as the worries too, because it's clearly empowering you. But what are the things that you go, oh, I got to watch out?
Yes, I think with generative AI, especially with the thing that you mentioned, identity, it will be very, very crazy. I was in Singapore a few weeks ago, and there was a lawyer there, and we talked a lot about the future of generative AI. I told him that, like, right now, someone will have to prove that, okay, I robbed the bank. But in the future, maybe I will be the one who has to prove that on the video where someone who exactly looks like me and robbing a bag is not me. So it will completely change the way we are trying to prove things. I think the whole world will change, but the good thing is that I can see more and more people are getting into the position when they are seeing in the video, then at least they are questioning if it's real or not. Because 2 years ago, if you show the video of a forest fire or flood that is done with AI, everybody's reaction was like, oh, this is terrible. Where did it happen? But now if you show a video like that to you, the first question will be like, okay, is this AI or is this something real? They will be like, okay, this might be fake. So at least, first of all, we are getting some kind of discussions about what is real and what's not. Also, this has to happen on the practical level, not like on a philosophical level, like what's real and what not. Although, if you check the philosophical side of reality, that is very interesting for me too. So talking about reality, like what is breaking reality? For me, I still think that a single photograph is more disturbing than any AI video. A single photograph is, first of all, breaking the locality. So I can show you a totally realistic photo of someone who was living or currently is 6,000 kilometers away. But the other thing is that there's no other tool that also breaking something that we experience in real life as a continuous stream of time, and it just gets one slice of it and frees it for the rest of eternity. If we're talking about reality, that is something that is like more unnatural than anything else, that you are breaking this continuity of the past, present, and future stream. I think we will see some bad uses with generative AI, I'm sure. But still, I think laws will have to catch up. So sometimes when I'm thinking about it, before drone laws, you could just like order a drone from China. It got shipped to you in Europe and you were flying it on the main square of your city. And right now you will have to get an insurance, get a license, you have to abide the laws. So maybe something this will happen with AI too, that we will see some new laws made especially for AI, and then we just have to play with those rules, just like with any other case.
I think there's definitely going to be a lot to manage as far as that goes, but there's no reason to use your face if I can just tell AI to use someone else's face. Even if I filmed you, I could quickly change that to someone else to make it whomever I need. That's already there. I would be curious. You spoke about earlier about, you love the testing process. You've obviously tested all the different platforms. I'm not going to ask you to name a favorite because they're all different. But I would be curious, what's different about them? What surprised you about different elements? Is there going to be a need in your mind to have lots of different tools? Or are you going to wind up with one overall that you think is going to be your go-to? How do you see this evolving?
I think the difference will be more about closed source and open source softwares because of their very different capabilities. So you can already see it with image generation. With Midjourney, you can create very nice results pretty quick. but you don't have that kind of control that's only available with open source tools. Also, there's no training, for example, for characters and products. With video, I can quickly name my favorite because it's VO. I can tell, of course, all the good things about it. I have to also tell that, like, I don't really remember when was the last time that something like this happened to me. But after I gained access to VO2, I started to test it with very, very simple prompts. And then I was like, okay, this can handle it very well. So I was just like trying to make it more complicated human actions. Usually those older AI tools are creating everything in slow motion, which is a very, very fast way to tell that something was AI generated. So I started to test more. And after like 1 or 2 days, I get so excited that each night I woke up around 2:30 a.m. by myself with just a simple prompt idea. Something that's like, okay, I want to test this with VO2. And from 2:30 a.m., I couldn't sleep until the next day, midnight. And for around 10 days, I only slept these 2.5 hours, which of course had its effect on my body. So there was this one test that I did about these tabletop food shots, product pack shots, which of course, maybe for AI people, it might not be very, very interesting because these are not these like eye candy, very, very catchy things. But I was testing them because I kind of know the real world value for them. So that kind of shooting is one of the most expensive things that you can do. And when I did that, I was already maybe around like 8 days into this non-sleeping phase. And my brain suddenly started to panic for like 5 seconds because I thought that I'm on a stock video website browsing for shots. And I will have to spend all these like hundreds of euros buying all these food shots. That was, of course, like 5 seconds. But at that point, I realized that this model is something completely different and it's very, very realistic. And that posed a really interesting question for me because last year the situation was much easier. So there were those video tools. Each of them had some kind of like special power, some kind of good feature. Each of them was updating their model every few weeks or months. And also I'm trying to look like big groups of them, the US models and also the models coming from China. And then suddenly there's a new tool from Google where you can create almost anything. And when that happens, when you remove that barrier, the question will be not what you can create, but more like if you can create anything, then what are you going to create? And I think that will be like a very, very interesting question in the next 5 years. It was kind of easier when you had a commercial idea in your mind, but you cannot create it because there's no possibility. So it was a much more simple world when I had a commercial idea in my head, but I'm not a director, I don't have the budget, or I don't have the connections. I was born in a place where we are not spending that amount of time and money for commercials. So I can just like blame all of those. It's very, very easy because that original commercial idea would be never made. But now, if you can make that commercial, for example, with VO2, then suddenly everybody will see if it's like a good idea or not.
I was going to say, it's easy to have a great idea when execution is impossible. But the moment execution is easy, all of a sudden your ideas are judged by a different level. And is it still a great idea? It's a really interesting question to think about. You've made a bunch of spec ads. I'm going to ask the obvious question. When you look at the work that's out there right now, other spec ads, not real ads. Well, you can even name some real ones if you want. What have you kind of looked at? You must get jealous every once in a while and go, oh my God, what a great idea. What are the things that have made you jealous? What are the things where you go creatively, that person did something I would have never thought of and it's amazing? Has there been anything?
Yeah, I think at the very, very end, it always comes down to the story. So one of the main questions right now about AI is about like, okay, how much realities. The human species is not a reality-driven species. So we are completely driven by stories. For example, I'm giving you $100 bill, but it's only worth something because you and I both believe that it represents a value. Otherwise, it would be just a piece of paper. And one example for a very, very good commercial is from Nike. It was made for the Chinese market, so it's about the tradition that they are giving away these red packets with some symbolic amount of money. So I think at the very, very end, I'm only jealous about the stories. Anything other, technical things, solutions, crazy camera movements or something like that, it's always good to watch it, but of course I will forget about them after 20 seconds. But when you see something that's like a really, really good story, then it will stay with you for a long amount of time.
Look, you were part of a big crew for a while. You're now kind of a one-person army. I'm sure you're working with other people at other times, but you can be a one-person army as well in getting this stuff done. What advice would you have to creatives out there, both the ones who are really seasoned and have a long career of storytelling and of filmmaking, and who are looking to figure out what this means to them? And also, what advice would you give to the ones who are just starting and looking to make their mark?
Yeah, it's extremely hard with AI because I think with traditional tools, it's kind of very easy to guide people. So if you want to learn DaVinci Resolve, for example, then I can tell you that, okay, this tutorial is really good. Or if you're already on this level, then just like go here and then just like try to learn about this. With AI, every week there is like 3 new tools coming out. Some of them are these crazy open source tools that, like, I'm not a very, very IT taught person. So some of these tools take me like 4 days just to install. So how can you give a reasonable advice to people? But the only thing that came down to me, from at least for myself, is just to simplify. Invest as much time as you can, or as I can, at the very, very end. I think compute and money doesn't really matter as much as time in this AI phase. Try to read a lot about these tools. Maybe the best advice I can give is that just like try to avoid all the mainstream news about AI. Most of them are simply built to hype up things. There's no real value of it. These sites will just simply state that like, okay, tomorrow Hollywood is dead, but especially like, what are they talking about? Hollywood is not dead, I think. Commercial shooting is not dead. But there are still some very, very interesting tools, and you can learn about them mostly on like Discord servers, forums, and some special sites that are more about the technical usability. They are not trying to get your attention for those 5 minutes. So I think just simply go step by step and try to invest as much time as you can into this.
So that adage that it's about investing 10,000 hours in what you do, it's putting the 10,000 hours in to become an expert, is still what's important.
Yeah, there's a man who I subscribed to because he's teaching about like macroeconomics, but also he's a pilot. I met him in the US, and you know, when someone asks him, or when I met him and we were talking about investing, then sometimes he will just say, okay, time in seat, because that's the pilot phrase for like, you need those hours driving that plane. It's not like, okay, you are in this level and someone will just tell you the secret sauce and you will just like jump onto that. There might be no shortcuts that you can just apply even in the AI field. So sometimes, of course, I want to do the same, right? So sometimes with, for example, Comfy UI workflows, I just want to download it and just like use it and prompt and get nice results. But sometimes the real value is about following through the journey of like experimenting, because in the current phase of AI, everything is experimental, right? So everything that you are doing right now, how you are working with things, will be gone in like 2 or 3 months. If you think about it now, it's March. in January or December, beginning of December. We didn't even have VO2 out. We had very, very different versions of most of the video models, image models, completely different scene of open source models. Most of them didn't really exist. So you will have to also adjust yourself to this constant learning phase, which will be much more useful than just like learning a workflow and just use it for years.
I think that this is the cadence that we're all going to have to get used to for a long time. It doesn't matter what we do. The world is changing. And in this sense, I think creativity wins, because leaning into creativity is that phase of experimentation. It is what allows us to get from point A to point B in a learning journey. That's about taking risk. That's about being creative. So in this sense, I feel really optimistic that creativity is going to remain the skill that helps us to harness this and to really capture the value personally and professionally.
Yeah, I was just reading a lot about the origin of the word creativity, the Latin root or the earlier root from Sanskrit. And what was interesting in that article is that the usage of the word creativity just skyrocketed in the mid 20th century. So somehow we got really interested in the word creativity. I think by now maybe it's kind of overused to talk about creativity. I don't really know what it means anymore when people use it. When someone says that, like, okay, he's like a creative person, exactly what do they mean under that word creativity? But I think in the AI phase, what I see, it's not about knowing these tools, but more about making these connections between the different tools. So maybe it's more about, okay, I know that this tool knows how to handle this well, that tool knows how to do that well, and then how can I make them connect? So maybe this is some kind of new kind of creativity, especially in the AI world, but I'm still like thinking about a lot, like what does it mean to be creative in the AI decade?
I think you bring us to a really good closing question, actually. And this point about actually AI unprompted, bringing something that's humor, something very human, and AI doing that in an unprompted way. Well, we always want to end our podcast by asking people the same question. And that is, what is the one thing that is irreplaceable in a human being?
I will have to steal the answer because I don't really know the answer, but what I heard in a very, very good podcast where they were discussing a lot of things about AI, that we are still better in two things. One is to know what other humans like. So I will know better what you will find funny, or what is funny but still in a way that will not make you feel bad, or it will still not hurt you, things like that. We are still better with this. The other thing that we are still better is judging which one is a better output from a generative AI. This sounds silly, but in reality, it's like a very, very hard case.
What's irreplaceably human is judging two different outputs of AI.
If you think about it, we can generate hundreds of images with Midjourney. For the AI, it will be very, very hard to pick the best one. For you and I, it will be a sub-second decision to see which one is the best output, or which one that makes you feel something, which output gives you a better solution for your needs. And the first thing will be more important, because even, for example, with the Porsche spec ad, I had to fine-tune it in a way that will make it funny, but it doesn't really disturb anyone. So it's kind of touching these points, but it doesn't want to offend anyone. So maybe that's something that is like very, very human, where you can just like dance on this like fine line between two completely bad options.
Well, I think that leaves a lot of room for AI to do a lot of things that we tend to think are human, but it also leads us with a really nice way to sign off. László, thank you so much. I cannot wait to see more of your work as it crops up. And I hope that as we speak, we bring you a lot more followers because your work deserves to be seen. Thank you very much. And I look forward to speaking again.
Thank you.